of a total of 2.05, then we're going to apportion that down to, ratchet down to 1.25 ADM and give each school a proportion of that 2.25. So each will get, in the district, will get 0.46 ADM, the satellite 0.3 ADM, the AOI will get 0.49 ADM. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? So that's the 4 point, the changes in the 4 points. What does that mean in terms of aggregation, and what impact will have that on aggregation? Aggregation must be completed by ADE now, by law, by April 15. And we have to make the data available to you by April 22nd. So we must do this. We don't really have a choice. Now, this is not doable. And the reason why I'm saying this is not doable, because we have AOI enrollment that can go throughout June 30th, throughout the fiscal year. So we will always have an adjustment after the end of the fiscal year, which the statewide recalculation, regardless whether you had changes or not, because of the AOI issue. And that's why I say this is, even though it's required by law, we will do it, but it will not be finalized till probably sometimes in August, to give the AOI time to submit any final data in June, then redo the calculation again. So your ADM will change again sometimes when we do the statewide recalculation. This is not something I have control over, or the department. This is the law again. This is how funding works. If you don't have concurrency with AOI, you should not have a problem with it. Now, in terms of aggregation, we will be discussing this among the group in the advisory committee and see what this day would work. But initially we're thinking to do 4 aggregation periods right after each time you submit the data in September. So it'll be sometimes in October, sometimes in December, February, and in April, to cover the 4 periods at times. Calendars will still be needed, because we still need to get your absence data at least once every 60 days. We still need to know what the enrollment days in your school, when the student enrolled and when the student withdrew, etc. So we will still need the calendar to kind of look at these days to figure all of this out. Absences, and this is something we will be having a meeting internally within the department to look at what our internal users within the department use the absences for, to see what else they need from you when we ask you for the data in SACE. So we will have an internal meeting, and we'll bring that to the advisory committee, and we'll discuss it further. And we talked about withdrawals. I think we covered that very well, so I'm going to skip that one. In terms of impact on payments and growth, for districts, I don't think it's going to be a problem, because the growth now is after the 100th day, so we will continue to do that probably after the March 15 to calculate the growth and make that ADM available to you and calculate the growth. For charters, we will have a new field requirement is for FTE estimated counts, because currently what we have in a lot of charter schools submit their estimated counts as a head count. Head count is different than ADM. If you have a 0.5 FTE student, that's not going to generate 1 ADM. So to help you kind of get that number as accurate as possible, we're going to require the FTE for the estimated count as well, just to make sure that we're not calculating head counts, we're actually calculating ADM as much as we can. There are some technical changes in statute which we have sent and requested from the legislators Legislature Council to look into anything has to do with 40-day and 100-day to change those accordingly. I know there are some language probably in the transportation laws about the 100-day and 180-day, etc. So we're looking at all of these and try to address them legislatively to make sure we clarify all of those dates. So there is still work that need to be done legislatively before we actually clear all the issues we have there. Now, in terms of absences, currently we have, I think, guideline GE 18 that address what is excused absence and what's unexcused absence, etc. I think kind of define that within the department. In fiscal year 12 going forward, that will be defined by each school district and charter holder governing board. So that will be up to your governing board to do the policy, establish that policy and say what is considered excused absence. I will not define this for you anymore. We'll have your governing board define it for you, and accordingly you will know what's considered excused and not excused. Go ahead.
Okay, so when you say that to me, one of the big issues that I had at Isaac was a student who's on out-of-school suspension. And we understood that that was an excused absence, and we had a lot of people had issues with that. Are you saying that the governing board can define an out-of-school suspension now as unexcused if they want to?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be entirely for the governing board. That's a change in statutes, by the way.
And that's for 2012?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Will you still look at the 10 consecutive days of unexcused for required withdrawal?
Yes.
You guys all hear that?
Say it again, please.
The 10 unexcused absences is still going to be there. So if you're going to use your suspensions as unexcused, you're going to make sure that you're going to have to withdraw those kids after 10 consecutive unexcused absences. You need to be careful with those.
Right, and so I'm not sure how this would interact, but I know that we have conversations with our truancy people all the time. So they have to go on statute, correct? So when we're making that change, was that taken into consideration? Because if we make it unexcused absences, or excused absences, that may change how they do their job, possibly.
I mean, obviously, this is a conversation that your superintendent will have to have with them.
What statute is this and where can you run to?
15806.
Pardon me?
15806, address excuses.
806.
It's B, 806B, I believe.
This year they changed the funding for SPED-EL and programs to be based on the 40th day. Is that going to change as well to now be based on these 4 days of
What is the funding? I'm sorry.
programs are based on
Oh, yes,
programs
yes.
are based on
Yeah,
certain days?
SPED and ELL are driven by ADM, so whatever ADM changes will drive the ADM for SPED and ELL. Okay. Now, since we don't have absences, I mean, the penalty, you still might have school closure. And school closure will affect your enrollment because if you have to close due to whatever reason, in reality, you don't have enrollment throughout the fiscal year, right? So that will reduce the number of hours actually made available to the student, which ultimately will affect your FTE or student FTE in the school. So to kind of address that issue, we have moved that part of the statute, 1590202 to 15806, and we put pretty much the same conditions that you would have had requested a waiver from the department to have them as, you're not penalized for having those absences due if you have like widespread illness, H1N1, an example of those. If you had the closure now, you can submit that request to ADE, and the superintendent have that authority to exempt and waive makeup time or days for those particular instances. They are the same one you had in the absences, but now they are in terms of school closure. Really, in how we have been dealing with this, that doesn't really change a whole lot. We have been granting you that stuff anyway whenever you had issues has to do with flooding or safety of the kids or H1N1 widespread illness, and you close the school for that particular reason. We asked you now to submit them all as excused absences. Then we adjusted your absence rate down for those particular kids, so you don't lose any funding for it. That's the same thing here. It's just we can waive the makeup time for those particular hours. Go ahead.
For chronic illness students, is that going to be a factor anymore than the stretched absence?
No, it won't, because there is no absence penalty, so you're not going to be.
Track chronic illness?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you need to track it for your purposes. You still have to report absences.
Take it back.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be penalized for it.
So the absence approval is gone, sort of, kind of.
Yes. It is gone. Fiscal year 12 will be gone.
Yeah, I think it might have been on the last slide. Just to be clear, normally we would assume that when someone withdraws, we withdraw them to the last day of attendance. But now we withdraw them to the last day of attendance or excused absence?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Question?
That question, people.
We're not using the absence, we're not doing ADA.
ADA is gone, correct?
Yes.
ADA is gone. Yay. For next year. It's still good.
For fiscal year 12. So this year is still here.
It's still here for this year, and you got to keep track of that for this year, but next year ADA is gone. Betty.
Sorry, I guess okay, so the requirement to submit every 60 days, is that in statute?
Yes. That's in statutes. That's for absences only, though.
So, but since funding isn't necessarily based on it, it's purely statistical at this point, correct?
Yes.
So it's conceivable that we could probably even approach them about eliminating the submission of absences sometime in the future.
You could. I don't really know who put that language there, to be honest with you. It was one of the amendments that came. I didn't even get to see the amendment. I thought we finalized the bill last year, and that language was not there. Then all of a sudden, somebody inserted the last-minute thing. Then I see, by the time I saw it, it was on the floor.
But you got to remember, AYP still uses attendance rates, okay? AYP is still going to be used for AYP so far. As far as, there's nothing that's changed regarding that. So you still got to keep track of your attendance and keep it as low as possible, your absences as low as possible, because it will affect your AYP status.
And your school rating, right? AYT school rating?
Yes. So there's other departments it's going to affect, so you need to still keep track and keep your absences as low as possible.
Just to be clear, we're discussing this. This is in relation to your funding. Not necessarily it's going to change the fact that you still need to track your attendance, your absence, etc. I mean, you still have to do this. This is not changing any of this. It's just going to be probably largely for your purposes and your administration purposes and some other ADE units within ADE, which we will be talking to them next week to figure out what these uses are and address them when we publish the final document, and we'll let you know all of this. But I mean, generally speaking, you still want to know if the kid is absent or not. I mean, these are stuff that you use anyway.
Are we still going to be audited on partial day absences next year?
Probably not. I don't know. And we are looking at that as well. We're looking at that.
Yeah, the Auditor General is also on this committee, okay? So they're looking at removing a lot of the questions out of the questionnaire people for attendance. So we're working on getting rid of some of these things. Okay?
So really our goal is try to look at these things that are burdening you in a way that's not necessarily, they're not needed, they're not necessary, they're not a big of a deal, but they're causing a lot of headache to you at the same time. And these are the things that we're really seeking from the advisory committee, is to figure out what these things and see what can we do about it. And if we can eliminate them, we'll eliminate them. So hopefully, some of these issues, they did come when we discussed them, and I'm sure a lot of more feedback